Chapter 20 Forgetful done. Third, seek recommended votes. Okay. Klein bowed slightly, took off the low hat and put it back on his head, thinking more about the Seal 0-08, a quill pen that looks ordinary. You don't need ink to write, so what is its real function? So, highly confidential that it is considered very dangerous? It's not a causal pen to write about who died, is it? No, that's against the sky. Insengwell doesn't need to abscond. Klein just turned around and wanted to leave, but Dunsmith suddenly stopped him behind him. Wait a minute, I forgot something. What? Klein looked back, full of doubts. Dunn put away his pocket watch and smiled to say with smile, remember to ask Mrs. Ariana, the accountant, to advance 4 weeks' salary, totaling £12, and then only receive half of the salary every week until the repayment is completed. Too much, there is no need. You can have less. Klein subconsciously said, he has no objection to the advance payment. After all, he doesn't even have the coach fare to go back, but it still scares him to get a huge sum of £12. No, it is necessary. Dunn shook his head and smiled. Do you think about it? Are you willing to continue living in your apartment now? Even the bathroom should be shared with several households. Regardless of yourself, you have to consider the lady and… See, Klein moment, he paused, looked at each other's clothes with a smile, meaningful way. And you need a cane, and you have to buy a new suit. Klein hesitated for a second, then woke up, and his face suddenly became a little feverish, because the suit he was wearing was cheap. Normally, the top hat must be made of silk, with a value of 5 to 6 souls, a bow tie of 3 souls, a silver inlaid walking stick of 7 to 8 souls, a shirt of 3 souls, trousers, waistcoat and swallowtail of about £7, and leather boots of 9 to 10 souls. So, a decent gentleman needs a watch chain, a pocket watch, and a wallet. At the beginning, the original owner and his brother Benson scrimped and saved a sum of money and went to the coat shop to ask. As a result, they left despondently even if they didn't dare to pay the price. They made do with buying a set in a cheap shop near Tycross Street, which was less than £2 in total. It is because of this incident that the original owner was extremely impressed by the price of clothes. Good. Klein stammered a little. He is as proud as the original owner. Dunn took out his pocket watch again and took one look at it. Or you go to find Mrs. Ariana first. I don't know how long you will stay at Old Neil's. In a little while, Mrs. Ariana will go home. Okay. Klein was deeply poor and didn't object. Dunn walked back to the table and pulled down one of several ropes. I'll ask Luoshan to take you. The rope was running, and the gear was turning. Luoshan in the reception hall of Blackthorn Security Company heard the ringing of the bell hanging next to him and quickly stood up and went downstairs carefully. It wasn't long before she appeared in front of Klein. Dunsmith humorously laughed. Didn't disturb your rest? Well, take Maridi to Mrs. Ariana. Luoshan quietly pie-mouthed, happy answer. Yes, Captain. That's it. This time, Klein was surprised and blurted out, go to the finance for an advance salary, and you don't need a note from the captain. Do you want to write something? So? Dunn asked doubtfully. I mean, don't you need to sign to advance your salary to Mrs. Leona? Klein said in a simple way. Oh, no, it's not necessary. Luoshan can prove it. Dunsmith pointed to the brown-haired girl and answered, Captain, there is almost no management of financial management here. Klein resisted the urge to vomit and followed Luoshan to turn and walk out of the room. At that moment, he once again heard Dunn shouted. Wait a minute, one more thing. Can we finish the sentence at once? Klein's face turned around and, smiling way, you speak. Dunn pressed the temple way. When you go to Old Neil's, remember to get 10 rounds of devil hunting bullets. Me? Devil hunting bullets? Klein asked in surprise. Welch's revolver is not in your place? You don't have to hand it in. Dunn put his hand in his pocket with one hand. If you cooperate with the hunting bullets, you can really protect yourself. Well, it can at least give you courage. Don't add the last sentence. Klein is worried about this matter, and he replied without hesitation. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. This requires me to write a formal document. You wait a moment. Dunsmith sat down, picked up a dark red absorbent pen, brushed and wrote a note, signed it and stamped it. Thank you, Captain. Klein sincerely took it. He stepped back slowly and turned around again. Wait. Dunn shouted again. Captain, you look like you're in your 30s. How can you be a precursor to aging in the future? Klein smiled, turned head to ask away. Is there anything else? I just forgot, you haven't practiced shooting, and it's no use holding a magic bullet. In this way, you will get 30 normal bullets every day, and take the opportunity to go out to the street, which is the underground shooting range practice at number 3 Zotland Street, where most of them belong to the police department, but there is a venue dedicated to our night watchmen. Oh, by the way, you still need to get a badge from Old Neil, otherwise you will have to. Dunn patted his forehead, took back the note from Klein's hand, brushed and added other contents, and added a chapter. Good gunmen are fed with bullets, so don't underestimate them. Dunn handed Klein the changed note again. I understand. Klein, who is afraid of danger, can't wait to go today. He took 2 steps to the outside and suddenly turned his body cautiously, considering the opening. Captain, is there anything else? No more. Dunn must nod. Klein breathed a sigh of relief and walked all the way to the door. In the meantime, he couldn't wait to turn around again and ask, is it really gone? He resisted this impulse and finally left the duty room smoothly. The captain has always been like this and often forgets things. Luo Shan walked beside him and slandered in a low voice, my grandmother has a better memory than him. Of course, he only forgets small things. Well, small things, Klein. I'll call you Klein in the future. Mrs. Ariana is a kind person and easy to get along with. Her father is a watchmaker and his craft is very good. Listening to the brown-haired girl's rambling, Klein set foot on the stairs, went back to the upper floor, and met Mrs. Ariana in the outermost office on the right. This is a dark-haired lady in a ruffled dress. She looks more than 30 years old, with fashionable curly hair, a pair of green pupils, clear and smiling, delicate and elegant. After listening to Luo Shan's retelling of Dunn Smith's arrangement, Ariana took out a note and wrote an advance slip. You sign it. Do you have a seal? If you don't, just press a fingerprint, okay? Klein completed the formalities with familiarity. Leona took out the copper key, opened the safe in the room, counted the gold pounds, smiled and said, you are lucky to have enough cash today. By the way, Klein, you were invited by the captain because you were involved in evil events and have your own specialties? Yes, madam. Your intuition is very accurate. Klein didn't skimp on praise. Orion Anna took out 4 light gray as the bottom, dark black dew grain of money, locked the safe again, turned around and laughed, because I am like this. Really? Klein appropriately expressed surprise. Do you know the serial killer who sensationalized the whole city of Tianjin 16 years ago? Leona handed Klein 4 gold pounds. Remember, is the bloody butcher who killed 5 girls. Some took their hearts and some took their stomachs. When I was a child, my mother often used this to scare my sister. Klein just thought. He took the bill and found that it was 2 5-pound bills and 2 1-pound bills, all with black stripes on the gray background and complex patterns and special watermarks at the 4 corners. The former is a little bigger, and in the center is Henry Augustus I, the 5th king of the Kingdom of Ruan and the direct ancestor of George III. He has a round face, long and narrow eyes, and an unusually serious expression, but in Klein's eyes, he has unspeakable closeness. This is a 5-pound note, equal to Benson's salary for nearly 4 weeks. In the center of the 1-pound note is the father of George III, the former King William Augustus VI. This strong man has a thick beard and firm eyes. During his reign, the Kingdom of Ruan got rid of the old shackles and once again reached the top of all countries. These are good kings. Klein vaguely smelled the refreshing smell of banknote ink. Yes, if the night watchman hadn't arrived in time, I would have been the 6th victim. There is still a trace of terror in Mrs. Ariana's tone, even though it has been more than 10 years. Sounds like the serial killer, no, the butcher, is an extraordinary person? Klein carefully folded the paper money, put it in the pocket on the inside of the suit, and then touched it nearby for confirmation. Yes. Mrs. Oriana nodded heavily. He killed many people before, and he was caught that time because he was preparing a demon ceremony. No wonder you need different internal organs. Sorry, madam. It reminds you of something bad. Klein said sincerely. Ariana chuckled. I'm not afraid anymore. I was studying accounting in a business school at that time, and then I came here. Well, I won't keep you. You have to find old Neil. Goodbye, madam. Klein took off his hat and bowed, and left the office. Before coming down the stairs, he couldn't help but touch the inside pocket to make sure that the 12-pound note was still there. He turned at the crossroads and walked to the right. It didn't take long for him to see a half-open iron gate. Knock, 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 knock on the door. There is an old voice way. Come on in. Klein pushed open the iron gate and found that it was a narrow room, which could only hold the next table and 2 chairs on the other side of the room. There is a tightly locked iron door, and behind the table, an old man with gray hair and a classical black robe is reading some yellowed pages by the light of a gas lamp. He looked up and looked at the door. You are Klein Maridi? Just now, little Luo Shan came over and said that you are very polite. Miss Luo Shan is really a friendly person. Good afternoon, Mr. Neil. Klein took off his hat. Sit down. Neil pointed to the silver tin jar with complicated patterns on the table. Would you like a cup of hand-ground coffee? The wrinkles around his eyes and mouth are deep, and his dark red eyes are slightly turbid. You didn't seem to drink? Klein keenly noticed that there was clear water in Neil's ceramic cup. This is my habit. I don't drink coffee after 3 p.m. Neil smiled and explained. Why? Klein asked casually, and Neil looked into Klein's eyes with a smile. I'm afraid I won't sleep well at night, so I'll hear some inexplicable whispers. Klein don't know how to answer the words and asked, Mr. Neil, what documents and classics should I read? As he spoke, he took out the note written by Dunsmith. It's related to history, complicated and fragmentary. To be honest, I've been trying to learn, but I can only master the basics. Others are too troublesome, such as people's diaries, popular books, epitaphs, and so on. Neil complained, for example, I need more detailed historical records to infer the specific content.
Why?
Klein was a little confused, and Neil pointed to a few yellowed pages in front of him and said, "This is the diary that Roselle Gustave lost before he died. In order to keep it secret, he used strange symbols he invented to record it. Russell the Great? The traveler's predecessor?" Klein Lun Lung, immediately concentrate on listening, because many people believe that he didn't really die, but became a hidden god. There have been cultists who worship him holding various ceremonies to try to gain strength. We occasionally encounter such things and get a few original or copied notes. Neil shook his head and said, "Up to now, no one has been able to decipher the real symbols of those special symbols, so the temple allows us to keep copies of the research, hoping to have unexpected surprises." Speaking of which, Neil showed a satisfiedly smile. "I have read several of the symbols and confirmed that it is the expression of numbers. Look, what have I found? This is actually a diary. Well, I hope to compare the historical events of different dates at that time, especially those around the emperor, with the records of the diary corresponding to that day, so as to interpret more symbols." Genius thinking, right? The old gentleman with gray hair and deep wrinkles looked at Klein with bright eyes. Klein agreed to nod. "Yes. Haha, you can also have a look, and you have to start helping me with this work tomorrow." Old Mr. Neil pushed the yellowed pages to Klein. Klein turned them positive, just took a glance, and the whole person stayed there. Although those symbols are very ugly and slightly deformed by copying, I will never admit my mistake, because this is the most familiar text, Chinese, TM, or simplified Chinese characters. Chapter 21. Meet an old friend in another country. For a moment, Klein thought he had crossed back, but the elegant gas lamp surrounded by brass grill and the silver tin jar with old Neil's hand-ground coffee made him realize the reality clearly. Russell the Great, the elder traveler, is really a compatriot. He records secrets in simplified Chinese, which does not exist in this world. With an indescribable feeling of meeting an old friend in another country, Klein quickly browsed the 3-page manuscript in his hand. On November 18th, it was a magical thing. A whimsical experiment and an accidental mistake made me discover a poor guy who was trapped in a storm and lost in the depths of darkness. He could only get a little closer to the real world at the full moon every month, but he still couldn't convey his cry. He was lucky. He met me, the protagonist of this era. After writing the above passage, I read it myself, and suddenly I felt a little embarrassed. Even if I used Chinese characters, I unconsciously brought a strong translation cavity. 40 years have passed, and my past memories are really like dreams. On January 1st, 184, at the Grand New Year's party, Mrs. Fronall was really a stunner. On January 2nd, the gentlemen of my Foreign Affairs Committee were all donkeys. On January 3rd, the original choice was still too hasty. Now it seems that both the apprentice, the diviner, and the thief are better. Unfortunately, there is no way to go back. On January 4th, why are my children so stupid? I told you 10,000 times, don't be fooled by those magic sticks. No, those magic sticks may have been fooled themselves. The key to the magic medicine is not mastering, but digesting. Not digging, but acting. The name of the potion is not only a core symbol but also a concrete image, and it is the key of digestion. On September 22nd, an alliance against me was established. My enemies finally came together from Fursak in the north, Ruin in the east, and Fey Nepod in the south, but I am not afraid. I will tell them with facts that the difference in weapons and knowledge cannot be made up by the number of people and low-order sequencers. Besides, my men are not without it, but the high-end ones, have they forgotten who I am? On September 23rd, I lost contact with the ship looking for the land abandoned by God. It's time for me to consider inventing the wireless telegraph. I hope it won't be affected by the storm. On September 24th, Miss Ithaca, Mrs. Buvlet Nair, was even more charming. Maybe I was just missing my youth. Because it is a copied copy, based on the complexity of Chinese characters, the volume of each word has been enlarged a lot. Therefore, the content on each page is not much. Even for preservation and research, the back is blank. But even so, Klein still sees the surge of emotion surge, especially the description of the key potions by Emperor Russell, which gives him the ecstasy of finding a problem-solving idea and mastering priceless secrets. Maybe this is the guiding light for my future extraordinary way. Well, the 3-page manuscript is a diary of different periods, and it can be seen that Roselle the Great has the habit of writing only at the beginning of a year. It is impossible to judge which year it belongs to in November and September for the time being. Who is the poor guy he found? What exactly do digestion and acting mean? Where is the land abandoned by God? One question boiled in Klein's heart with surprise, which made him wish to collect the diary of Russell the Great at once and read it from beginning to end. Klein? Just then, the old Neil across the street was puzzled and spoke. Klein woke up with a start. Busy Hyde laughed. I thought I would be the most special one, and wanted to try to decipher and interpret it. What a young man. Old Neil nodded. I used to think I was the most special one too. Klein flipped through the 3-page manuscript in hand, made sure he didn't miss it, handed it back and asked casually, Are these the only ones we have? I want to see more diaries of Russell the Great. Do you think there will be many? Old Neil rubbed his manuscript, and his wrinkles sneered deeply. Every year, there are not many extraordinary and mysterious events in itself. Alas, the main reason is that those extraordinary species gradually die out in our northern continent. Without them, there will be no more potions, so there are fewer and fewer extraordinary people. Alas, over the past few hundred years, dragons, giants, and elves have become records in books, and even the Sea Clan no longer appears in the offshore. Hearing these words, Klein suddenly remembered a terrier and immediately laughed. I think it's time to establish the Dragon and Giant Protection Association. Old Neil listened with a blank face, and it took him a long time to understand what it meant. After figuring it out, he patted the table and smiled happily, which was not a gentleman. Haha, Klein, you are really a humorous person. This is the tradition of our Kingdom of Ruin. Young people can't go wrong with humor. I don't think it should be too narrow-minded. How can there be only dragons and giants? It should be called Fantastic Animal Protection Association. No. How can you forget those poor plants? Klein shook his head, speaking of which. He and Old Neil looked at each other and said in unison, Magic Biological Protection Association. As soon as the word sound just fell, the two men smiled tacitly, and the unfamiliar atmosphere just now disappeared a lot. There are fewer and fewer interesting young people like you. Where was I? Old Neil's face wrinkled and smiled. I remember that there are not many extraordinary and mysterious events every year. The idiot who worships Emperor Roselle is a minority. We can get 3 manuscripts, which is very good. Well, there should be other cathedrals or parishes. He whispered a few words, took the pityao that Klein had put on the table and glanced at it. Is it a pistol bullet, a rifle bullet, or a bullet from a steam high-pressure gun? A revolver. Klein replied according to the real situation. Okay, I'll take it out. Well, do you have a gun bag under your arm? As a gentleman, you can't let your waist and below swell in public. Old Neil made a joke that all men know. Oh no. Do you need to go to the captain and write it down? Klein smiled with cooperation. Old Neil stood up and said, No, just record it. This belongs to supporting items. Repeat after me, supporting items. You used to be a teacher? Klein asked funny that I spent some time in church, Sunday school, and free school. Old Neil raised the note, took out the key in the drawer, and opened the iron gate leading to the inner room. Extraordinary people and ordinary people don't feel much different. Klein muttered silently and turned his attention to the 3-page diary on the table. Russell the Great did touch the mysterious realm. His diary is priceless. For others, it's just pieces of waste paper, and I don't know when it will be deciphered. For me, it's a treasure. I wonder where the rest of the diary is. We need to find more. Klein's thoughts fluctuated, and it was difficult to calm down until Old Neil came out of the inner room and closed the iron gate. 10 hunting bullets, 30 pistol bullets, a cowhide underarm gun bag, and a badge of the 7th Group of the Special Operations Department. Please count it, try it, and sign the record book. Old Neil put his things on the table. Pistol bullets are packed in paper boxes, divided into 3 layers, neatly arranged, just like the bullets in Klein's house in Huangchengcheng, slightly slender. The devil hunting bullet is filled in a small iron box, which has the same shape as a normal pistol bullet, but the appearance is silvery white, and there are complex dazzling patterns on closer inspection. At the bottom, there is even a small holy emblem engraved with the stars are red and half moon on a black background. The cowhide gun bag has a solid touch. The belt is buckled, and the badge half the size of a palm next to it is iron-colored, with the words Joni Aho Wajan County Police Department and 7th Group of Special Operations Department, inlaid with silver. They are wound into 2 nearly closed circles, surrounded by the sign of double sword crossing surrounding crown. Unfortunately, it is not the badge of the night watchman. Klein said, half feeling and half tentatively. Old Neil smiled, and only urged Klein to try the underarm gun bag. Taking off his coat, Klein had a great effort to fasten the gun bag and cling to the armpit of his left arm. Not bad. He didn't take it off again, but put on his formal suit directly. Old Neil looked at his eyes and nodded with satisfaction. Very suitable. My eyes are still so accurate. After putting away other things in his pocket and signing his name in the notebook, Klein chatted with Old Neil for a few more words before leaving it halfway through. He suddenly felt annoyed and patted his forehead. Forgot to inquire about more sequences related to potions, all because of the diary of Roselle the Great. He still doesn't know what the sequence beginning of the complete way mastered by the Night Goddess Church, that is, Sequence 9, is Luo Shan seems to have mentioned. Sleepless people? As Klein walked slowly towards the stairs, a figure stamped down. He is wearing tight trousers that are easy to move, and his white shirt has never been plunged into it. He has obvious romantic temperament of a poet. It is the black-haired and green-eyed police officer who searched Klein's house before. Just now, the two of them have seen each other upstairs, but they just didn't speak. Good afternoon. Poetic young night watchman greeted with a smile. Good afternoon. I don't think I need to introduce myself. Klein is humorous. No, I'm very impressed with you. The young night watchman held out his right hand and said, Leonard Mitchell, the midnight poet in Sequence 8. Sequence 8. What a poet. Klein gave him a light shake and asked with a smile. Impressed by me? Leonard Mitchell, with deep green eyes and a shallow smile, replied, You have a special temperament. Gay is angry. Klein's mouth is slightly moving and he barely laughs. I don't think so myself. It's special enough that you are still alive after such an incident, and you didn't accept our protection for the first time. Leonard pointed to the front. I have to replace the captain. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Klein sideways out of the way. When he disappeared step by step at the end of the stairs, Leonard Mitchell suddenly turned around and stared at the dim light and the slate floor, whispering to himself in the air. Did you see anything? Sure enough, he is nothing special. Chapter 22 sequence start on the stairs, back to the reception hall. Klein was about to say goodbye to Luo Shan when she heard the brown-haired girl say briskly, The captain asked you to come back on Monday to deal with the chores at home first. Okay. Klein didn't expect the management of the Night Watchman team to be so humanized, and he was quite grateful at the moment. He originally planned to get up early tomorrow, take advantage of the opportunity of hanging out in the morning to go to Tianjin University and find the faculty responsible for the interview reception, and let him know that he did not participate in the follow-up link. After all, the original owner entered the interview with the recommendation letter of the tutor. Anyway, it is basic courtesy to have an explanation from beginning to end, and even if he does not consider himself, he must respect the tutor's human feelings. When there is no telephone, telegrams are charged by a single letter, and it is obviously too late to send letters. It used to be the most economical and appropriate way to take a bus directly. Now with the captain's special approval, Klein doesn't need to be so tired. He can get up after a full sleep and go leisurely. Klein was hat farewell, suddenly looked around low voice way. Luo Shan, do you know what is the beginning of the complete sequence that the church has mastered? This is what he forgot to ask old Neil just now. Luo Shanjing big eyes, surprised to see Klein Wei. Do you want to be extraordinary? Am I that obvious? Klein touched the corners of the mouth, slightly embarrassed to answer. After knowing that there are extraordinary and mysterious forces in the world, it is inevitable that there will be a little yearning. My goddess, do you know how dangerous it is? Didn't the captain tell you? The enemies of the extraordinary are not only heretics and dark wizard, but also themselves. Almost every year, people lose control and die. Don't you consider the feelings of your family? Luo Shan used gestures to strengthen the tone, and the reaction was slightly radical. Klein, I think it is a better choice to be a civil servant honestly. There is almost no danger, and the salary has increased every year. When you have a few years, you can rent a single-family house in the North District or near the suburbs and form a happy family with a charming young lady, with a lovely and naughty little angel. Luo Shan, stop. Stop. Klein saw the brown-haired girl talking further and further, and quickly stopped him with sweat on his forehead. I just want to know the basic common sense for the time being. Well? Luo Shan was silent for a few seconds, lowered his eyes, and said sheepishly, Because of my father, I am always, a little excited about similar issues, but frankly, I am full of admiration for every gentleman and lady who volunteered to be the night watchman. I understand. Klein hurriedly chimed in. Luo Shan blinked his eyes with light brown pupils and added, My father once said, Don't think that if you become more severe and become an extraordinary person in a higher sequence, you can solve hidden dangers and fight against dangers. In fact, on the contrary, you will encounter more and more terrible things. When you meet some unknown and horrible things, madness and death are the only two endings. Oh, he died the second week after he finished the sentence. Klein, don't look at me with sympathy. You should be afraid of these things. I just want to know the basic common sense. Klein didn't know whether to cry or laugh and repeated the answer just now. Mr. Captain speaks more clearly than you do, and even if I don't become an extraordinary person, I've already met something great. All right. Luo Shan do thinking. I listened to the captain and old Neil said because of the reduction and extinction of extraordinary species, high sequence of the strong in today's era is almost gone, can become extraordinary, is very severe. We have hundreds of thousands of people in the suburbs of Tianjin, probably, maybe more, and the extraordinary people are only over 30. Well, I guess. Well, I didn't count the dark wizard, who live in a dark corner. Before Klein spoke, she seemed to regain her vitality and clenched her fist in her chest, and this more than 30 extraordinary. Sequence 9 is the most. Well, I seem to be beside the point. It doesn't matter. These are the common sense I want to know. Klein hopes that Luo Shan can ramble and reveal more information as she usually does. In short, it is already very powerful to be extraordinary. Very powerful. Luo Shan repeated, the complete sequence belonging to our church starts with sleepless and the sequence 9 sleepless. Sure enough. Klein micro-invisible and heard Miss Luo Shan uncontrollable mouth to describe. You should guess from the name. Sleepless is a person who doesn't have to sleep at night, and it only takes 3 to 4 hours to rest during the day. Wow, I really envy you. No, I don't envy you at all. Sleep is the gift of the goddess and the happiest thing. Where did I say? Yes. The sleepless can see through the darkness without light. The deeper the night, the stronger it is. I mean the strength in all aspects, including their strength, their inspiration, and their thinking. However, although they can find unknown dangers hidden in the darkness, they still have to resort to hunting bullets and other items when they encounter monsters that cannot be solved by normal methods. My father used to be a sleepless. Klein cross-examined, Luo Shan one way. After that, the Midnight Poet in sequence 8, and then the Nightmare in sequence 7. Nightmare? Klein suddenly remembered Dunn Smith's guidance of his dream and confirmed it and asked, Captain? You know? Miss Luo Shan's mouth is almost O-shaped. Captain has been in my dream. Klein looked around and lowered his voice again. Understand. Luo Shan suddenly enlightened, followed by a small voice response. She picked up the coffee cup next to her, took a sip of it and turned to sigh with emotion. There are only 2 people in our church in Tinjin City. It should be that the captain is one of them. Even if he goes to a big parish like Backlander, he is also a very powerful figure. Some deacons are not necessarily better than him. It turns out that the captain is so amazing. Klein smiled and agreed. To be honest, Dunn Smith's appearance in the middle of the night last night was so impressive that he almost instinctively believed that he was a great extraordinary man. Of course. Luo Shan straightened his back proudly. Immediately, her thinking jumped and she said with distress, I don't know what it is above sequence 7. Maybe the whole night watchman team is only clear to the captain. That other sequence start? The incomplete ones. Klein changed the subject with satisfaction. I have to say that the sleepless, described by Luo Shan, really meets some of his imagination and expectations for the extraordinary, but it is not the kind he wants to be. The perfect sequence 9 in his heart should be able to learn and master a lot of mysterious knowledge, laying the foundation for figuring out the reasons for his crossing and crossing back in the future. Luo Shan wanted to think and sighed. I'm not too interested in this aspect. I only know that there are more than other churches. After all, the goddess is also the mother of secrecy. Well, there should be 2 or 3 kinds, because some players are always cold and scary, and they smell strange. Some players, well, I mean old Neil, he knows a lot and there will be many interesting magic ceremonies. I think about it again. He once said his serial number 9 title. Many interesting magic rituals? Peeking at the secret person? Sounds very close to what I want. Klein was slightly pleased. In addition, I also know the name of a sequence 7, the kind with incomplete paths. Luo Shan, who was reminded of something else just now, said in a show-off tone, What is it? Klein is extremely curious in the case that the strong with high sequence are scarce or even not. Sequence 7 is already the backbone of the church, right? Luo Shan's sweet smile, slightly meaning to answer. A psychic. Ms. Daly? Klein subconsciously asks. After the initial surprise, he felt that it was not so surprising, and only the strong in sequence 7 could achieve the psychic performance like Ms. Daly. Luo Shan's eyes widened again, and she couldn't believe it. You, how do you know? I've met Ms. Daly. Klein didn't hide it, all right. Rosanna said in a yearning tone, If I can directly become a psychic like Ms. Daly, then I am willing to be an extraordinary person. No, I will seriously consider it for 10 minutes. Well, Ms. Daly satisfied all my imagination of the extraordinary. Thought. Klein roughly worked out one plan after another, and his ideas gradually became clear, too. He vomited polluted air, restored basic calm, and carefully looked at the fast-swept scenery outside the window, until the carriage arrived at Champagne Street. The accident didn't happen, but after Klein pushed the door and got off the bus, he immediately felt the uneasiness of being stared at. Pretending that he didn't notice anything, he took the newspaper and walked slowly in the direction of Zotland Street. However, he didn't enter that street, but went around the Red Moon Street on the back, where there was a beautiful white square and a cathedral with a spire. St. Selena's Church, the headquarters of the Night Goddess Church in Tinjin. As a believer, it is nothing strange to come to Mass and pray on a rest day. This cathedral has an obvious Gothic-like style of the earth, and the whole cathedral is black. The facade is a tall and mottled clock tower, which is located on the huge central buttress between the red and blue lattice windows and inserted into the sky. Klein stepped into the church and walked down the aisle to the big prayer hall. On the way, the narrow high window inlaid with blue and red fine patterns penetrated into the wisps of dyed light, which was nearly black and blue and red as the moon, setting off the surrounding darkness. The feeling of being watched disappeared again, and Klein looked as usual, without joy, and came to the open big prayer hall step by step. There are no high windows here, and the deep darkness has become the protagonist. But behind the arched platform, above the wall where the gate is facing in, a dozen or 20 fist-sized round holes penetrate outward, allowing the bright and pure sun to shine in, condensed and bright. It's like a pedestrian in the dark, suddenly looking up, seeing the starry sky and the bright pieces. It's so noble, so pure, and so sacred. Even though he always thought that gods could be studied and understood, Klein couldn't help but bow his head. In the low and gentle sermon of the bishop, he walked quietly in the aisles separating the left and right seats, found a seat that was empty and close to the passage, and sat down slowly. After leaning his cane against the back of the chair in front, Klein took off his hat, put it on his thigh with the newspaper, and then shook hands against his drooping forehead. Throughout the process, he did it slowly and orderly, as if he were really praying. Klein closed his eyes and quietly listened to the bishop's voice in the dark line of sight. They are naked, have no clothes or food, and have no cover in the cold. They got wet by the heavy rain and clung to the rock because there was no shelter. They are mothers whose children have been taken away, orphans who have lost hope, and poor people who have been forced to leave the right path. The night didn't give up on them and gave them care. Note 1. The echo is superimposed and the sound is heard. Klein's eyes are dark and his heart is cleansed. He realized this calmly until the bishop finished his sermon and ended the mass ceremony. The bishop opened the door of the next confession room, and a gentleman and a lady lined up. Klein opened his eyes, put on his hat, picked up his walking stick and newspaper, followed him up and lined up in order. After more than 20 minutes, it was finally his turn, stepping in and closing the door backhand. Klein's eyes are dark again. What do you want to say, son? The bishop's voice came from behind a wooden baffle. Klein took out the badge of Special Operations Unit 7 from his pocket and handed it to the bishop through the gap. Someone is following me. I'm looking for Dunsmith. As if influenced by darkness, his tone became soft. Bishop took the badge, after a few seconds of silence. The door of the confession room is to the right. In the end, there is a secret door next to it. After entering, someone will lead the way. While speaking, he pulled a rope in the room and let a priest hear the sound of the bell shaking. Klein took back his badge, took off his hat, pressed it on his chest, bowed slightly, then turned around and pushed the door out. After confirming that the feeling of being watched didn't appear again, he put on his black top hat again, carried his cane with no superfluous expression on his face, and turned to the right until he came to the arched altar. On the side-aligned wall, he found a secret door, opened it silently and flashed in. The secret door closed quietly, and a middle-aged man in a black priest's robe appeared in the light of the gas lamp and in Klein's eyes. What is it? The middle-aged priest asked briefly. Klein showed his badge and repeated what he had just said to the bishop. The middle-aged priest stopped asking questions, turned around and walked silently. Klein nodded, caressed his hat, took a black cane, and quietly followed each other. Luoshan said that the Church of St. Selena is on the left at the intersection to the Chinese Gate. Note 1. Adapted from Chapter 24 of Job in the Old Testament. Chapter 26 Practiced the footsteps echoed in the dark narrow corridor, spread far away in silence, and there was no noise. Klein's back was straight, and he followed the middle-aged priest slowly, without asking questions or chatting, as heavy as a calm lake. Through the heavily guarded passage, the middle-aged priest opened a secret door with a key, pointing to the downward stone staircase. The crossroad is the Chinese Gate to the left. May the goddess bless you. Klein clicked 4 times on his chest to outline the shape of the crimson moon. Secular uses secular etiquette, and religion uses religious rituals. Praise the goddess. The middle-aged priest responded with the same action. Klein said nothing more, and walked down the stone stairs step by step into the darkness, with the help of elegant gas lamps inlaid on the walls on both sides. Halfway through, he subconsciously looked back and saw that the middle-aged priest was still standing at the door, standing at the top of the ladder, standing in the shadow of the light of the gas lamp. Like a wax figure that could not move, Klein looked back and continued to descend. Before long, he touched the ground covered with cold slate and came to the crossroads. He didn't turn to the direction of Chinese Gate, because Dunsmith, who had just rotated, would definitely not be there. Following the familiar road on the right, Klein climbed another ladder again and appeared inside the Blackthorn Security Company. Seeing that the door was closed or half-closed, he did not look for it rashly, but entered the reception hall and saw the brown-haired girl with a sweet smile absorbed in reading a magazine. Hi, Luoshan. Klein came to the side and tapped the table on purpose. Bang. Luoshan Huaran stood up and knocked over the chair. Hectic said. Hey, it's a nice day. You, Klein. Why are you here? She put her hand on her chest and took 2 breaths, just like a lazy little girl who is afraid of being caught by her father. I have something to find a captain. Klein answered briefly. Scare me to death. I thought the captain was out. Luo Shan stared Klein one eye. I don't know, knocking at the door. You should be glad that I am a generous and kind lady. Well, I prefer the word girl. What do you want with the captain? He's in the room opposite Mrs. Orion. Even if the spirit is very tight, Klein was Luo Shan with a smile, hesitated away. Secret. Luo Shan, eyes wide open, can't believe at the same time. Klein bowed slightly. Leave quickly. He went through the partition door of the reception room again and knocked on the door of the first office on his right hand. Please come in. Dunn Smith's deep and gentle voice sounded. Klein through the door and push, backhand folded, hat salute way. Good morning, Mr. Captain. Good morning. What can I do for you? Dunn's black trench coat and hat are hanging on the coat rack next to him. The exposed body is only wearing a white shirt and a black vest. Even if the hairline is high and the gray eyes are deep, it looks refreshing. Someone is following me. Klein answered truthfully, without any unnecessary embellishment. Dunn leaned back, shook hands, and looked quietly into Klein's eyes with deep gray eyes. Instead of following the topic, he asked, You came from the church? Yes. Klein definitely answered. Dunn nodded slightly, didn't say good or bad, back to the point. It may be that Welch's father didn't believe the cause of death we reported and invited a private detective from the Windy City to investigate. Constance, also known as the Windy City in Jianhai County, is an extremely developed area of coal and steel industry, ranking among the top 3 cities in the Kingdom of Ruan. Before Klein commented, Dunn continued. It may also come from the source of that note. Well, we are looking into where Welch got the Antigonus family note. Of course, we can't rule out other individuals or organizations pursuing this note. What should I do? Klein's sync of voice asked. There is no doubt that he hopes it is the first reason. Dunn didn't immediately answer. Took the coffee cup to drink a mouthful. Gray eyes see a ripple way. Go back the way you used to, and then do whatever you want. Any? Klein asked one. Any? Dunn nodded affirmatively. Of course. Don't scare each other off and don't break the law. Okay. Klein took a deep breath, left the room and returned to the basement. He turned left at the crossroads, bathed in the light of gas lamps at intervals on both sides, and walked quietly in the empty, dark and cold passage. The more lonely the echoes are, the more fearful they are soon. Klein approached the stairs and walked up step by step, and saw the middle-aged priest standing in the shadow, and at the door. When they met, they didn't speak. The middle-aged priest turned around silently, and made way. Silent all the way forward, Klein returned to the big prayer hall. The round holes behind the arched platform were still bright and pure. The darkness and tranquility in the room were still the same, and the gentlemen and ladies waiting in line outside were still the same, but they were much less. After waiting for a while, Klein took a cane and a newspaper, as if nothing had happened, and slowly left the big prayer hall and St. Selena's church. As soon as he went out and saw the fierce sun, he suddenly felt familiar with being watched again. Only feeling that. He was like a prey stared at by an eagle. Between Horan, a doubt emerged in his mind. Why didn't people follow me into the church before? Although in that case, I can still hide his brief disappearance with the help of the dark environment and the priest. Is it difficult for him to pretend to pray and follow the monitoring? I didn't do anything bad. What's wrong with going in fair and square? Unless he has a black history, fears the church, fears the bishop, and knows that the other person may have extraordinary abilities. So, the possibility of a private detective is very low. Who? Klein spat out a sigh, no longer so tight as before, and walked leisurely around the back of Zotland Street. He stopped in front of an old-fashioned building with mottled walls. The house number here is 3 and the name is Zotland Shooting Club. Part of the underground shooting range of the police department is open to the public to earn extra funds. As soon as Klein entered the room, the feeling of being peeped disappeared immediately. He seized the opportunity and gave the badge of Special Operations Department to the waiter in charge of reception. After a little verification, he was led underground and came to a closed small shooting range, 10M target. Klein simply explained to the waiter, took out the revolver from the underarm gun bag, and took out the box of brass bullets from his clothes pocket. Suddenly being targeted, his desire for self-protection overcame procrastination, so he couldn't wait to come and practice marksmanship. Bang. After the waiter left, he threw out the wheel, withdrew the silver hunting bullets one by one, then picked up the normal bullets with brass color and stuffed them into the bomb nest. This time he didn't leave any space to prevent accidental firing, nor did he take off his formal coat and half-top hat. He had to practice in the most ordinary dress. After all, it was impossible to shout, "Please stop. Let me change into a light suit first." After encountering the enemy and danger to pop, Klein closed the wheel and slipped it with his thumb. Suddenly, with a gun in his hands, he jerked straight up and aimed at the target 10 meters away. However, he didn't rush to shoot, but seriously recalled the off-target experience of military training and common sense such as 3 points and 1 line and recoil when shooting to hua. Hua. In the sound of clothes tearing, Klein practiced aiming and holding posture over and over again, as if he were a child in the college entrance examination. After repeated many times, he retreated to the place against the wall, sat on the soft bench, put the revolver aside, massaged his arm and rested for a long time. It took a few minutes to think back, just now. Klein picked up the pistol with wooden grip and copper will again, came to the shooting position, made a standard posture, and pulled the trigger. Bang! His arm shook, his body leaned back slightly, and the bullet missed the target. Bang!
Bang!
Bang! Having learned the experience, he fired one shot at a time and groped for his feelings in practice until all 6 bullets were shot start on the target. Klein stepped back and sat down again, taking 2 breaths. Bang! He threw the wheel, let the 6 shells fall to the ground, and then continued to stuff the remaining brass bullets one by one. The activity relaxed his arm, and Klein stood up again, summing up and returning to the shooting position. Bang!
Bang!
Bang! Gunfire echoed. The target shook. Klein practiced again and again, rested again and again, polished all the 30 normal bullets he received and the remaining 5 rounds before, gradually stabilized the target, and began to pursue the number of rounds. After shaking off his sore arm, he poured out the last 5 shell casings, lowered his head, stuffed silver hunting bullets with complex patterns one after another, and reserved the wrong firing position. After the revolver was put into the underarm gun bag, Klein patted the smoke and dust on his body and walked out of the special shooting range with a relaxed body and returned to the street. The feeling of being looked at once again surfaced, but Klein's mood was calmer than before. He walked slowly to Champagne Street, spent 4 pence to take a rail bus back to Iron Cross Street, and entered his apartment. The sense of snooping was silent. He took out his key, opened the door, and saw a man in his late 30s, wearing a linen shirt and with short hair sitting at his desk. Hard to tight. Immediately relax. Klein smiled hello way. Good morning, no. Good noon, Benson. This man is his brother and Melissa's brother, Benson Moridi. He is only 25 years old this year. He looks old because of his receding hairline. He looks almost 30. He has dark hair and brown eyes, which is somewhat similar to Klein, but not that kind of light bookish. Good afternoon, Klein. How was the interview? Benson stood up with a smile on his lips. His black coat and half-top hat are hung on the bulge of the bunk bed. Very bad. Klein replied with no expression. Seeing Benson was stuck, Klein chuckled and added, as a matter of fact, I didn't attend the interview at all. I found a job ahead of time with a weekly salary of £3. He repeated what he had said to Melissa before. Benson shook head to say with smile. There's a feeling of seeing children grow up. Well, this job is not bad. He sighed away. It's good to hear such good news when you come back from running. We have to celebrate tonight and buy some beef. Klein laughed. Okay, but I think Melissa will be distressed. Shall we go shopping for ingredients in the afternoon? Take at least 3 souls? Well, to be honest, £1 for 20 souls, 1 soul for 12 pence, and half a penny and a quarter a penny. This kind of currency system is simply counterintuitive and very troublesome. I think it must be one of the most stupid currencies in the world. Say that finish. He saw Benson's expression suddenly became serious, suddenly a little uneasy, wondering if he said something wrong. Is it true that Benson is a pure and extreme advocate of the kingdom in Memento Mori where the original owner is missing, and there is no room for others to deny it? Benson paced a few steps, a face of serious retorted. No, not one. No one. Klein Lung quickly react and brother smile at one another. It was Benson's satirical humor. Benson corners of the mouth become warped, solemnly added. You should understand that a reasonable and simple currency system requires a premise, that is, knowing how to count and mastering the decimal system. Unfortunately, such talents are too rare among those big people. Chapter 27 Dinner for 3 brothers and sisters just sharp. Klein laughed, and with the rich experience of previous lives, he added, in fact, there is no evidence that those big people have brains. Good. Very good. Benson laughed and gave a thumbs-up sign. Klein, you are much more humorous than before. A sigh of relief, he continued. I have to go to the dock in the afternoon, and I can't rest until tomorrow. Then, let's go to the Tingen City Housing Improvement Company to see if there are any cheap and good townhouses for rent. Besides, we have to visit Mr. Franchi first. Mr. Landlord? Klein asked doubtfully. Is there a townhouse with a good block location under the current landlord's name? Benson caught a glimpse of his younger brother, funny, and said, You won't forget that we have a 1-year rental contract? This is only the past 6 months. Pust. Klein immediately took a deep breath that I really forgot about it myself. Although the rent is paid once a week, the lease period is as long as 1 year. Now moving is tantamount to breach of contract. If the defendant goes to court, he will have to pay a lot of money. You still lack enough social experience. Benson touched his receding black hairline and sighed with emotion. This is still the clause I tried hard to get at the beginning, otherwise Mr. Franchi would only sign it every 3 months. For the rich class, landlords directly rent it for 1 year, 2 years, or even 3 years for stability. But for us and our neighbors before, landlords would always worry that someone would have an accident and could not pay the rent, just hoping for a short-term contract. In this way, they can often raise prices according to the situation. Klein added, combining the original owner's memento mori and his own rental experience. Benson sighed away. This is the truth and cruelty of today's society. Well, you don't have to worry. The contract is very easy to solve. Frankly speaking, as long as we are in arrears for a week, Mr. Franchi will immediately throw us out and deduct valuable items. After all, his IQ is not as good as that of a baboon, and he can't distinguish things that are too complicated. Hearing these words, Klein suddenly remembered a Sir Humphreys terrier and shook his head seriously. No, Benson, you are wrong. Why? Benson was puzzled. Mr. Franchi's IQ is still a little higher than that of a baboon. Klein replied seriously, and just as Benson smiled, he added, if he is in good shape. Ha. Benson lost control of his reaction. Laughing, he pointed to Klein, but he couldn't find a good expression at the moment, so he had to get back to business. Of course, as gentlemen, we won't adopt that shameless method. We will communicate directly with Mr. Franchi tomorrow. Believe me, he is easily persuaded. For this, Klein has no doubt that the existence of gas pipeline is the most powerful proof. The two brothers chatted for a while, put a small amount of fried fish left over from last night into the vegetable stew soup, and softened the rye bread with steam during the boiling process. After smearing some cream on the bread, Klein and Benson had a simple meal, but they still ate quite contentedly. After all, the milk fragrance and sweetness were memorable. When Benson went out, Klein also took 3 sol notes and scattered coppers and went to the lettuce and meat market. He spent 6 pence to buy 1 pound of beef, 7 pence to buy a big tassock fish with tender meat and less thorns. In addition, there were potatoes, peas, white radish, rhubarb, lettuce, turnips and other ingredients, and rosemary, basil, cumin, oil, and other things. In this process, he can still feel someone spying and watching himself, but there is still no substantive contact. After a delay in Slim Bakery, Klein returned home and began to exercise his arm's strength with heavy objects, such as stacked books. He originally wanted to play military boxing to strengthen his body, but now he has forgotten the radio exercises. Besides, this kind of thing that only comes into contact with military training has to be as simple as possible. Klein didn't let himself exercise too tired, because it would make him tired and increase the danger. He stopped at the right time and read the textbooks and notes of the original owner, hoping to go over the quaternary knowledge again. In the evening, Benson and Melissa sat at their desks, looking at the food set, as straight as the children in the senior grades of elementary school. A variety of mixed flavors compose a rich food overture, which is the heady smell of boiled beef, the obvious and lasting stimulation of mashed potatoes, the sweet entanglement of pea soup, the subtle and positive harmony of stewed rhubarb, and the sweet surrounding of cream on rye bread. Benson swallowed and looked back at Klein, who put a crispy and yellow fish in the plate. He only felt that the fried smell went into his throat, esophagus, and stomach from his nose to Gollum. His stomach made a noticeable noise. Klein rolled up his shirt cuff, carried a fish plate, put it in the center of the packed desk, and then just visible took out 2 large glasses of ginger beer from the cupboard and placed them in Benson's corresponding position. He smiled at Melissa and magically pulled out a lemon pudding. We have beer, and you have this. Thank you. Melissa took the lemon pudding and said weakly. Benson said, took the cup and smiled. Come on. Let's celebrate Klein's finding a good job. Klein took the cup and touched it with Benson and Melissa's lemon pudding. Praise the goddess. Gollum. He looked up and took a sip, and the spicy taste burned through the esophagus, bringing a wonderful aftertaste. The full name of ginger beer is ginger beer, but in fact it does not contain any alcohol. The taste of ginger beer is similar to that of lemon, which is acceptable to women and children, but Melissa doesn't like the taste very much. Praise the goddess. Benson took a sip, while Melissa bit a little lemon pudding and chewed it repeatedly, reluctant to swallow it. Give it a try. Klein put down the glass, picked up spork, pointing to a table full of food. Among them, he has the least confidence in pea soup. After all, he won't eat such strange things on earth at all, and he can only recreate it according to the original owner memento mori. As a brother, Benson dug a spoonful of mashed potatoes and stuffed them into his mouth, stewed to the limit. The rotten potato flavor was mixed with faint lard flavor and just right salt flavor, which made him spit wildly, and his appetite was wide open. No, wrong. Good. Benson praised vaguely. It's much more delicious than the last time I ate in the company, when it was filled with cream. This is my specialty. Klein accepted the compliment. Thanks to Mr. Welch's chef. Melissa looked at the beef soup. Green basil leaves, blue lettuce heads, and white radish pieces were immersed in colorless soup, hiding the soft stewed beef, which was fresh in color and attractive and smelled. She forked a piece of beef and chewed it in her mouth, only to feel that there was still chewiness in the softness. A little salty taste, the sweetness of radish and the spicy smell of basil stimulated the delicious taste of beef itself. She seemed to be praising something, but she couldn't stop. Klein tasted it and found it delicious. It's a pity that it's not as good as his best level. After all, some seasonings are not available, so it's hard to avoid being strange that they can only be replaced by others. But of course, even at the best level, my own cooking is just SOSO. Suddenly, he felt sorry for Benson and Melissa, who had never seen the world before. After swallowing the beef in his mouth, Klein put in a piece of fried tassock fish sprinkled with cumin and rosemary. It was crispy outside and tender inside, brown and delicious, and the salty flavor was intertwined with the oily taste. Nodding slightly, Klein tried a piece of rhubarb stew again, feeling that it was just fine, which could solve the boredom of meat. Finally, he summoned up his courage and scooped up a spoonful of pea soup. Too sweet, too sour. Klein frowned, but when he saw Benson and Melissa satisfied after tasting them, he was a little suspicious of his taste, so he couldn't help drinking ginger beer and cleaning his tongue. At this meal, all three brothers and sisters ate so much that they couldn't get up from their chairs for a long time. Let's praise the goddess again. Benson picked up only one mouthful of ginger beer, satisfied, and said, "Praise the goddess." Klein drank the last drink in one gulp. Praise the goddess. Melissa put a little lemon pudding into her mouth and tasted it back and forth. Klein said, with a little drunk, and laughed, "Melissa, it's not good for you. It's best to eat your favorite food from the beginning so that you can see its most delicious side. When you are full and your appetite drops, try it again, and the taste will be discounted." "No, it's still delicious," Melissa answered firmly and stubbornly. The three brothers and sisters talked and laughed, digested for a while, then cleaned up the dishes and sporked together and poured the fried fish oil back. After being busy, one of them reviewed courses, one taught himself accounting knowledge, and the other continued to read textbooks and notes, leading a full and satisfied life. At 11 o'clock, Klein's three brothers and sisters put out the gas lamp, washed, and slept respectively. In front of me, I felt faint and confused. Suddenly, Dunn Smith, wearing a black knee-length trench coat and a half-top hat, appeared in Klein's sight. "Captain." Klein suddenly woke up and clearly knew that he was in a dream. Dunn's gray eyes didn't stir, as if to say a little thing. "Someone sneaked into your room, picked up your revolver, forced him into the corridor, and handed it over to us." "Someone broke into my room?" The monitor finally made a move. Klein got a fright, didn't dare to ask more, just nods. "Okay." The scene in front of him changed immediately, and the colors were chaotic and broken like bubbles. Eyes open, Klein carefully side-head. "Look at the window." I saw a thin and strange figure is standing in front of the desk, silently rummaging through something. Chapter 28. The secret order burst. Burst. Klein's heart suddenly began to beat violently. It contracted into a ball and suddenly swelled, making his body tremble slightly. For a moment, he almost forgot what he was going to do and what to do, until the figure of the diver suddenly paused, and his ears turned slightly, as if he had heard something change. Blood falls from the brain, and Klein regains his basic thinking ability. He puts his hand under the pillow and holds the wooden handle of the revolver. The hard and smooth touch came, and his mood quickly stabilized. The action was slow and silent, and the pistol was pulled out and aimed at the head of the diver. To be honest, he is not sure whether he can hit the other side. Although he has been able to hit the target stably before, the moving person and the fixed target are completely different concepts, and he is not arrogant enough to confuse the two. However, he vaguely remembers a sentence from a previous life, which probably means that the greatest power of a nuclear bomb only exists before it's launched. In this environment at this time, the reason is the same, and the best deterrent is before the bullet is shot, without pulling the trigger and firing blindly. The other party will not be sure that he is a rookie, and he will probably miss him. He will be worried, he will be afraid, and he will consider so much that he will bind himself. In an instant, one idea after another emerged, which made Klein immediately make a decision. He was not the kind of person who was more critical and calm, but had long expected the scene of being watched, and had expected that intimidation was the main thing. There is an idiom in the country where people eat a lot of goods. Be prepared. When Klein pointed his gun at the diver, the thin man who ran froze and seemed to sense something. Then, he heard a voice with a chuckle. "Good evening, sir." Thin man's hands quietly hold. The body seems to be tight. Klein sitting in the bunk bed, with a gun at his head, tone as leisurely as possible and natural way. "Please raise your hands and turn around as slowly as possible. Frankly speaking, I am a timid and nervous person. If you are too fast, I will be scared. I can't guarantee that there will be no mistake. Yes, that's it." The thin man raised his hands half by his head and turned his body a little bit. The first thing that caught Klein's eyes was the neatly buttoned black tights, and then two thick and sharp brown eyebrows. Klein can't see fear from his blue eyes, but he feels stared at by a ferocious beast. It seems that if he is not careful, he will be swooped down by the other party and torn to pieces. He tightened his grip on the gun handle, trying to make his expression calm and indifferent, until the thin man, completely facing himself, Hyang Chin, pointing to the door, gently said, "Sir, let's go out and talk. Don't disturb other people's dreams." Well, it's the most basic courtesy of a gentleman to move slowly and tread lightly. The thin man's cold eyes turned, glanced at Klein, still half raised his hands, and walked to the door step by step, under the aim of the revolver. He twisted the handle and opened the door slowly. Just as the door was half open, he suddenly squatted down and rolled forward, and the door seemed to be pulled by the strong wind and slammed again. Well, Benson in the upper bunk was shocked by this huge movement, in a daze, and was about to wake up. At this time, there is a melodious and quiet melody coming from the outside, and a low and soothing voice sings. The threat of fear, blushing hope. At least one thing is true. This life flies, one thing is true. The rest are lies. Once the flowers bloom, they will die. Note 1. This poem seems to have the power to make people relax and settle down, and Benson in the upper bunk and Melissa in the back sleep again in a daze. Klein's body and mind are quiet, and he almost yawned. The action that the thin man got rid of just now was so agile that he didn't have time to react. Looking at the closed door, he smiled and said to himself, "You may not believe it when you say it. My hair is actually empty. Watch out for misfiring blanks." Next, Klein listened to the midnight poem and waited patiently for the end of the battle outside. But in a minute, the piece stopped like the melody of the moonlight lake, and the deepest silence was restored in the night. Klein silently slides the wheel, moves the space away, and waits for the result. It was 10 minutes, and just as he was nervous and hesitant to go out and find out, Dunsmith's calm and gentle voice finally came from the door. "Solved." "Call." Klein spit out a sigh. "Pick up the revolver. Take the key, barefoot, carefully close to the door, silently open the door, and see a black trench coat knee-high, half-top hat safe, gray eyes deep. Dunsmith standing opposite, closing the door backhand. He followed Dunn to the end of the corridor and stood in the faint crimson moonlight. Wasted some time in his dreams. Dunn looked at the red crescent outside the window and said quietly, "Know his origin?" Klein relaxed a lot. Dunn nodded slightly. An ancient organization called the Priory, which was established in the Quaternary, was related to the Solomon Empire and some fallen aristocrats at that time. The notes of the Antigone family came from them. Because of the negligence of a member, it entered the antique market and was obtained by Welch. They had to send people everywhere to pursue it. Before Klein asked questions, he stopped and added, "We will arrest some of their members in reverse according to the clues." Well, it may not have a good result. These guys are as good at hiding as mice in sewers, but at least they will understand that the notes of the Antigone family are likely to have been obtained by us, or the key clues have been mastered. In that case, as long as they are not very critical and important items, they will completely give up this action. This is their philosophy of survival. What if the notes are very critical and important? Klein asked with concern. Dunn smiled and didn't answer, but said, "We don't know much about the Priory. Thanks to your cleverness, this success belongs to you. Considering the possible and hidden dangers and the help of improving inspiration, you have a chance to choose." The opportunity to choose? Klein guessed something vaguely, and his breathing became heavier subconsciously. Dunn convergent smile, solemn and serious way. "Do you want to be an extraordinary person? You can only choose the initial extraordinary from the incomplete sequence. Of course, you can also give up this opportunity and choose to accumulate credit until it is enough to make you a sleepless, that is, the beginning of the night guard given by the goddess, the beginning of the complete sequence mastered by the church." Sure enough, Klein, heart pleased, temporarily did not appear hesitant mood, take the initiative to ask away. "Which sequence 9 can I choose from?" There must be detailed information to determine whether to give up or accept, and which one to choose. Dunn turned around, dressed in a scarlet veil, looked into Klein's eyes and said slowly, "In addition to the sleepless, the church also has 3 kinds of potions of sequence 9. One is called Peeping the Secret Person, which is the ability that old Neil has mastered." "Oh, Luo Shan should have mentioned to you that she always can't control her mouth." Klein, embarrassed smile, "Don't know how to answer." Fortunately, Dunn didn't care, continued, "Our secret voyeur's potions and unconnected parts were obtained from the Moss Penance Society. At that time, it was said that they had not fallen, still adhered to morality and precepts, persisted in the pursuit of knowledge, and strictly kept secrets. Anyone who joined the club, after becoming a secret voyeur, should be forbidden for 5 years, learn to be silent, so as to practice and improve their concentration, and do whatever they want. The Peeping Secret Man has a comprehensive but preliminary understanding and mastery of mysterious knowledge, such as magic, witchcraft, and astrology. He knows a lot of ritual magic, but it is easy to perceive some existence hidden behind things. He must be careful and be full of awe for extraordinary power. We lack most of the sequence, so that it is not a chain. For example, it's sequence 8, of course, maybe the temple has it. This almost meets all my requirements. Klein nodded slightly, with an impulse to choose. Fortunately, he remembered something else. What about the other two? The second kind is called Corpse Collector. Many people in the southern mainland choose it. After taking this potion, they will be mistaken for the same kind by the unwise undead and will not be attacked. They can endure the erosion of cold, decay, and the smell of death. They can directly see some evil spirits, understand the characteristics and weaknesses of many undead, and gain some physical improvement. We have its subsequent sequence 8 and 7, it's sequence 7. This is Daly's original choice. Dunn described it in considerable detail. The psychic really looks mysterious and cool. However, what I want most is to master the occult knowledge. Klein didn't interrupt, and listened quietly to Dunn. Smith's side had looked at the eye crimson moonlight way. We only have the third sequence 9. I don't know if there is anything else hidden in the temple. It is called Diviner. A soothsayer? Klein pupil miniature, thought of Russell the Great regret left in the diary. He regretted not choosing among apprentices, thieves, and diviners. Note 1. Adapted from Edward Fitzgerald's English translation of Rebecca. Chapter 29, Occupation and Housing are serious matters. Klein tried not to let himself have abnormal performance, holding the real curious mentality, and asked, "What is the ability of this soothsayer?" Your question is not accurate enough. It should be what ability you will gain by taking the soothsayer potion. Dunn Smith shook his head and smiled, his gray eyes and face turned away from the red moon, hiding in the shadow. Astrology, card divination, spiritual pendulum, second sight, and many other similar things, of course, don't mean that you can understand and master them immediately after taking the potion. The potion only makes you qualified and capable of learning these things. Because of the lack of direct means against the enemy, you should be able to imagine that ritual magic requires too much preparation and is not suitable for encounters at all. Therefore, correspondingly, soothsayers will be more knowledgeable and professional than voyeurs in occult knowledge. It also sounds quite in line with my requirements. It's just that the lack of direct enemy means makes people hesitate. And the Night Goddess Church has a high probability of not having a subsequent sequence. The temple should be a quiet church at the headquarters of the church. The low sequence direct enemy means may not be comparable to guns. Klein fell silent, and the balance in his mind swayed from side to side, sometimes peeping at the secret person and sometimes diviner. As for Dunn, Smith said, smiled to say with smile, "Don't be in a hurry to choose. Tell me the answer on Monday morning. No matter which one you want to choose, or you plan to give up directly, there will be no extra opinions among our night watchmen. Calm down and ask your heart." With that, he took off his hat, bowed slightly, slowly crossed Klein and walked to the stairs. Klein didn't speak, didn't give an answer immediately, saluted in silence and watched in silence. Although he always hoped to be an extraordinary person, when the opportunity really came before him, he was still full of hesitation. The lack of sequence, the loss of control of extraordinary person, the credibility of Russell the Great's diary, and the illusory whisper that made people crazy and degenerate were mixed into a swamp that hindered progress. He took a deep breath and spit it out slowly. Students who are not bad or bad fill in the college entrance examination. Klein smiled at himself, restrained his divergent thinking, quietly opened the door, returned home and lay in bed. He lay there, with his eyes open, quietly looking at the bottom of the upper bunk bed stained with a faint blush. Drunk people stumble by outside the window, and a carriage is speeding in the open street in the distance.